Well, folks, I guess something happened to our theme music again this evening. The time is now the 5 minutes after 10 Eastern Standard Time and 5 after 7 Pacific Standard Time. I am your host, Maggie Rose McGrath, and this is the Concord Show being brought to you by Revolution Radio at www.freedomslips.com. Today's date is January the 25th, 2017, and we happen to have another person who does the roundtable on weekends, Jer Bear. He is bringing in as producing us this evening, so we can use his phone number as a way to call in the second half of the hour to be able to listen to Shauna. You can call in on the number that is listed at the top of the chat or the scheduling. And there is Studio B. We are in Studio B this evening. Our guest is going to be Shauna Cox. I'd like to do a little bit of housekeeping, please, first. I would like to remind all of you that right now we have only met about 1/3 of our goal towards the monthly cost to run Revolution Radio. Right now, we are needing $2,800 to pay for all of our operating expenses. We have seeds that you can purchase through Revolution Radio, both seeds that are heritage and heirloom seeds. You can purchase either for putting away for storage, for long-term storage, or for this spring having your own victory garden. I'd also like to be able to put out a big shout out to both Amanda and Patty. Their sons have served in the military as a combat medic in the military, and they are opening up, I understand, in Roseburg, Oregon. That's in Douglas County, Oregon. They've informed me they're opening up sort of like an antique mall, and it's going to be also where you can do repairs and reusing and creating. Their address is at 256 Southeast Stevens Street. That's 256 Southeast Stevens Street in Roseburg, Oregon. That's in Douglas County off of the I-5 corridor. Again, 256 Southeast Stevens Street. They are supporters here of Revolution Radio. So I want to put a big shout out again for Amanda and Patty and thank their sons for their military service. Also, I want to let you all know is that now yours truly, Maggie Rose McGrath, has, with the help of her friend Robert Guile, who is a computer consultant, IT tech, we have put up a website. I have my first website. You can go there. It's still under construction. It's at www.theconcordshow.com. That's www.theconcordshow.com. You'll see a picture there of the Minuteman. He was one of the original people during the Revolutionary War. He was a captain in the militia. And you'll see a picture of him standing there with his foot on a rock, and he's holding his firearms, his weapon. And as you know, this show was named after the Battle of Concord and Lexington during the Revolutionary War. When people back then decided that they weren't going to take it anymore and they were going to stand up for their God-given rights and for their human rights. And we were able to take back this country. We want to do it now, folks, non-violently. We want to do it peacefully. We've been trying to reiterate that to people time and again, that we want to handle this in a peaceful way. And that is another reason I'm so proud to bring on this show Shauna Cox. I met Shauna Cox a year ago. I was texting back and forth with my friend Angie Bundy and asked her, is there anything I can do for the people down at the refuge? She says, here, let me put you in contact with Shauna. So Shauna and I started texting each other back and forth, and she said, well, let me go talk to Ammon Bundy. She went to talk to Ammon. Ammon said, yes, tell Maggie Rose McGrath that what we really need is rat and mouse poison. We're being inundated with rats and mice here. They have not been properly maintained by the employees. The employees are gone for the winter. They will not be back out at the refuge until spring. See if she can bring some rat and mouse poison out. So my husband and I put that in the car. We went, made the purchases. We were heading out thinking we were going to listen also to Chris Ann Hall, We didn't quite make it in time for her talk, but we had the pleasure of meeting everybody there at the refuge. It was a wonderful family-like atmosphere. People were cleaning, they were sweeping, they were praying. They were working together like one big community family. I was very impressed. That night, my husband and my son and I went to the auditorium at the high school where there was a community meeting going on. The next morning, we woke up at the Best Western. We met John Capel, who was with ABC News. He was also there for the night. And we went out together to the refuge again on the 20th and sat in on a 2-hour class on the Constitution. I again met all the people out there, many of the people that were working with Shauna Cox, women that were cooking in the kitchen. They gave me a meal while I was there. The place was very organized, very peaceful, very harmonious. And I was very impressed with the way people were conducting themselves. And from that point on, I fell in love with Shauna and all the people that she was working with. And you all know what happened a few days later. We got a call from Shauna after she was released up in Portland, and we had the pleasure of going up there and meeting her sister and some of the other people that were the main players in this saga. Shauna is an author of a book. She's going to maybe briefly be able to tell us a little bit about that book. She had eyewitness boots on the ground in Bundyville during the 2014 situation there. And pretty much we're going to just have her share with us what she wants us to know, what's going on right now, the information that she feels is really important to get out to you. In the second half of the hour, we're going to be wrapping that up, and then we'll go to station break. And then after the station break, we will go into the second hour. That first 30 minutes of the second hour, we will take phone calls to the phone number. I think Jer Bear has that number for us. It's area code 702. Jer Bear, are you there with us where you can give us that number? The phone number
702-605-4436. It is in the text next to
Great. And it's also in the chat room. Okay. So folks, with nothing more to do, I would like to introduce Shauna Cox. Shauna, thank you for coming up on Revolution Radio here on the Concord Show with us tonight.
Well, thanks for having me, Maggie. So good evening, America. I'm sure that there's still millions of Americans who wonder what is happening in Nevada and the Oregon trial still to come. So everything I tell you, and I have so many things to tell you, it's hard to remember everything, and I hope I get the things answered that you have questions to, that these are my opinions and my witnesses. So I will try to answer your questions later. I wanted to tell you that I'm going to start with Nevada first because the trial begins on February the 6th. They actually will just begin to do a jury selection at that time. I don't know how many of you already know the story of what happened. I'm sure most of you do. And at this point, right now, the update is that we have been put into 3 different tiers. All of these men that are arrested here are still in prison. They've been here for just right about 1 year now with no bail and still held in prison. I'm going to name you the men that are here in Nevada, and I'm going to tell you the charges that are charged against them. It starts out with Cliven Bundy, the father, Ryan Bundy, a son, Ammon Bundy, the son, Ryan Payne, a friend, Pete Santilli, the media, Melvin Bundy, another son, David Bundy, another son, Brian Cavalier, or Buddha, as he was been known, who was here as a bodyguard for Cliven Bundy, Gerald DeLumas, Eric Parker, Scott Drexler, Richard Loveland, Stephen Stewart, Todd Engel, Gregory Burleson, Joe O'Shaughnessy, Micah McGuire, and Jason Woods. Now, these guys are being tried for a lot of charges. It's kind of outrageous, but conspiracy to commit an offense against the United States, conspiracy to impede and injure a federal officer, assault on a federal officer, threatening a federal law enforcement officer, use and carry of a firearm in relation to a crime of violence, obstruction of the due administration of justice, interference with interstate commerce by extortion, interstate travel in aid of extortion, aiding and abetting. You know, what's really crazy about that is I would really like to challenge you to even go on YouTube and click in the Bundy standoff or the Bundy Ranch or Clive and Bundy or Dave Bundy, any of the Bundys, Ammon Bundy, and really take a look at who was impeding who and who was threatening and who had the weapons. And this is the hardest part of this, is that we have a lot of very innocent men who never carried a gun, who never threaten anybody, who have loving families and are hard workers, and that an agency came in thinking that they were doing something because it's their job, and got it out of control, where they literally attacked a family. The first 6 men that are going to be tried on this, they put into 3 separate trials, which is really crazy because that's going to cost the American taxpayers a lot of money to run 3 total different trials. The first 6 will be Stephen Stewart, Scott Drexler, Eric Parker, Greg Burleson, Micah McGuire, and Todd Engel. And these they call the gunmen, because some of them had shown up on top of the bridge. I telling you that nobody saw them until later, when somebody had taken a picture of one of the men named Eric, or maybe it's Scott, anyway, that was lying there. It's a very famous picture. He was lying there on the bridge with a gun going through the crack of the concrete barrier. But if you take a really good look at that picture, you will notice that this is not an illegal weapon. It's a deer rifle. It doesn't have a scope. And as far away as anyone is from that position, you couldn't hit him if you were a sharpshooter. So there wasn't a threat there. No one could see them, and they were just looking. They're at the very furthest bridge away. Since we have
I think it was
learned,
I think it was
Sorry.
Eric Parker. I think it was Eric Parker.
it could, I can't remember. Sorry. Since I have come down here to help them, we have learned more about them. Actually, none of the Bundys knew their names. They'd never met them. I never met them before. I didn't know them. Most people had not, because they only arrived right before this thing took place. They were along with a lot of other American people who had been watching the internet and saw the things that happened, and the American family was being attacked, and they came to help. And we're very grateful for them. They dropped everything, whatever they were doing, and came to the aid of the Americans. But they wanted to see for themselves. How can an American army be sent against a family and had begun to attack the first one of Cliven's sons? That was Davy. The very first day that he arrived was on Sunday, April the 6th. And he and some of the family members were standing along the roadside, and they saw these convoy of cattle trucks and SUVs coming down off the dirt roads on the Gold Butte Mountain, and they stopped to take pictures. Davy stood there with his iPad leaning against his car, just taking pictures. He wasn't in the roadway. He was just on the edge of the road. They weren't impeding anybody. And these agents jumped out and went after them. And anyway, you can actually find that story if you put YouTube in, and it's called, just type in Dave Bundy, and I actually did interview with him right after that took place. After he came back from jail, they arrested him after they threw him to the ground and roughed him up, and then they took him over to the compound where they have all these cattle and paraded him around for a couple of hours. Then they took him into Las Vegas to a prison there in Henderson. Anyway, it was a really horrifying experience, and that was the beginning of more attacks as they went from day to day. While they were there were snipers up on the hill pointing guns at the family. It was horrendous, and that's why these men came to help their countrymen. I don't know how much detail I actually should go into this because it's going to be going into trial. But I do know to tell you that I did write a book about this. It was called The Last Rancher Standing, and you can purchase it on Amazon.com.
Now, I understand that many of our friends are going to be going this Saturday to John Day, which is where you and Lavoy and you were in Lavoy's truck when you guys were ambushed and assaulted, what we call Bonnie and Clyded. You were actually on your way to John Day to meet with the ranchers and the farmers and have a constitutional classes in the Constitution or talking about committees of safety. They're going to be having the meeting with Lavoy that never happened this Saturday in John Day at the John Day Fairgrounds from 4:30 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. on the 28th of January, this Saturday coming up. And Jeanette Finnegan is going to be there with much of her family, Chris Ann Hall, constitutional lawyer, and many other guest speakers. Do you have any other friends or anybody that you know, Shauna, that's going?
Oh, there's many. There will be a lot of people there in support, but there's always safety in numbers, and so we say that everybody's welcome. We appreciate people because if it's in your heart to do the right thing. Now, speaking of that, it was like what happened up in Oregon. There have been a lot of things that we've uncovered that there have been many people that have been sent into, I guess you can call it spy on us, because they're undercover agents to not just see what things were happening, but some of them tried to ramp things up and make it into something bad, which created maybe them to try to make some charges against us. But if you pay attention to all the videos that you've watched, probably on the internet, because there's been many, 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 you will see that everything in Oregon was very peaceful. That we prayed every morning and night, and that's the way it was in the Bundy Ranch. It was a constant praying morning and night, and on the food, and there was peace there, and there was love there, and there was never anybody out to attack anybody or do anything hateful or mean. That's not what we were there for. And if people could understand the reason for the stand at the Bundy Ranch is really the beginning of things, because it was to say that the ranchers have a right because they have what we call AUMs, or when they settled this country in the West, which is not in the East. In the East, they don't have these vast lands. In the West, we have huge amounts of land where people would raise cattle or sheep or horses, and they would have to, it takes about 100 acres to feed one cow compared to back in the East where they have all the grass and the water and the lush. That we're talking in the desert, and these are kind of like wild cows that are very lean, but they have very lean meat, and they survive in this desert land. But it doesn't say that rancher owns all that land, but that he has a right to that land because they were there first, and they established their rights. They own the water, they own the forage, which is what the animals eat, and that doesn't stop people from coming and hiking and filing for a mining claim or any of those types of things out there, or riding their, their four-wheelers or whatever. It doesn't stop that. It's that they just have those rights, and those rights were established over 100 years ago for the Bundys alone. And that was so important because that's what happened in Oregon, because they saw, the Bundys realized what happened after all the people came together and we took pictures. And because more people take pictures, then we expose the people who don't want to do the right things, who want to push their weight around, who are the bullies, who want to take away your personal properties and rights. And that's what was happening to the Hammonds up in Oregon and Harney County. And when the Bundys saw what was happening to them, they truly had heartfelt feelings because of the trials and the problems that they had gone through for so many years. That's the tragedy, because we're not just talking about the Bundys, we're not just talking about the cattle, we're not talking just about the Hammonds, but there have been many, many other people who have been suppressed this way, who have had their land stolen and their homes and their businesses and been put out of business. In that area, in the Clark County alone, there were 52 ranchers just back in the 90s. And suddenly, in just a few years, because of the new contract that the BLM wanted to enforce upon the ranchers, or then that really managed them right out of business. That's the tragedy of this. And Cliven stands that he says, so I just wouldn't sign a contract with them because they were just trying to take us out of business, and it was very lopsided. That's where he stands. They truly have their own way of ranching, because their ranch is different than everyone else's. There are ranches like this, but the Dan sisters, I could go on and name a whole lot of people, but let me tell you, it's criminal what's happened is we have allowed these kind of agencies to get power and make their own rules and laws. We have no separation of powers any longer. And that's where the crime comes, because we have an agency that is totally out of control. They create more and more government agencies who put more and more rules and restrictions upon the people until we become enslaved. We no longer have a free country. And that's why we're really excited about President Trump. And we're praying that he makes the right decisions, that we can go back to the Constitution. We have a hard time in court. Many times we've been shut down, especially up in Oregon. We were shut down being able to even bring in the truth, because they make all these rules and backdoor deals until you can't even see what's really happening. If you think the judges are impartial, that's not true. They already know all this. There is no justice and honor in the court. It's all about who's the quickest and the most deceitful. I was really blown away by that. They are, at this point in time in Oregon, they're going to have their first trial on February the 14th. It actually won't begin that first week, because that's the first part of the week they choose their jury, and then the trial begins. And when we went through the trial there, we had all 7 of us, and everybody, including them, were charged with conspiracy to impede a federal officer by force and intimidation or threat. That was totally crazy, because like I said, and you probably heard me say this before, when they told me finally after hours of sitting in the snow, and in the cold and in the truck, before they actually told me that we were under arrest, and that the charges were the conspiracy to impede a federal officer by force, intimidation, and threat. I was in shock, and I said, "What?" I said, "I never even saw an officer until after they shot at me." And that was how they began, with no warrant whatsoever. And I think that the only way that we were able to even be found not guilty, and it was unanimous, so that by law that says that we are innocent, all 7 of us, but we couldn't bring into court the things that we needed to say, that we needed to tell the truth about, that we wanted to talk about. We were not allowed to. And that was really difficult. I mean, we weren't allowed to talk about the Constitution. We weren't allowed to talk about jurisdiction. We weren't allowed to talk about misjustice or any of the criminal acts in the courts. I mean, we couldn't talk about anything. We weren't allowed to bring in witnesses. And the only thing that we could do was pray. And we prayed and we prayed every day that the jury would be able to hear with their hearts and hear with their minds and their ears things that were not being said, because we were not allowed to say them. And these poor men that are up there now, there's still 8 people, and I have to say Sandy because they're mostly men, but Sandy Anderson and her husband, but they're being charged with the same exact charges that we were acquitted of. And now they've decided that they're going to add all these more charges. They say they're misdemeanor charges, but the judge says she's not going to allow them to be heard by the jury, that she's going to have the court case with the jury first, and then she will try the other charges, which is there's probably about 7 other charges that are misdemeanors that she's going to charge them with. And then she has one other charge that they're trying to throw at Emmer, which is a crazy charge. They're using it as a felony because this trench that he dug allegedly actually had cable already in it, and they were saying that he had desecrated some Indian artifacts or something, which is not true. And then they paid a high dollars to haul in dirt to fill the hole back up. Well, there was dirt there. Why didn't they just fill it in? It's anyway, it's crazy.
Shauna,
So
I was there. Yeah, I was there, Shauna, when they decided weeks later to allow people to go in and get their items. I got a phone call from Gary Hunt, who writes the articles on Outpost of Freedom, and Todd Bedwell, who you had asked to come up from San Diego to help with some of the efforts, and we won't go into all that. But they had asked me, being that we were only 4 or 5 hours from at that time from Harney County, would we go and get their items for them? Gary had some cameras, he had some drones. Ammon Bundy had between $4,000 and $6,000 under his mattress that Lisa wanted me to get. Todd had a lot of equipment. And so we had to get notarized statements from both Gary and Todd to go up there and get these items. We drove all night, got there at 5:30 in the morning because we were told we had to be there at 12 noon. Tom Davis and 3 other women were there to get your car with the tow truck drivers, to get your car and your belongings off the refuge. And when they finally decided not to let us get the stuff until the next day, we saw the hole that was there. That hole was something, there was dirt right by it. All they had to do is push the dirt back into the hole. They are trumping up the cost of supposedly what they're saying, that they paid for this and they paid for that, when really they didn't do that. They're just basically trying to bleed the financial coffers of the taxpayers. They're making up a lot of stuff as they go along, Shauna. The federal government, the BLM, Fish and Wildlife, and the Department of Forestry, they're making up things as they go
Are you
along.
there?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can now. Sorry, I had lost you for a minute. Yes. Well,
Did you hear what I said?
Right. Okay, so we have to look to the Seventh Amendment, because it says if a judge has no right to try these people herself when they've asked for a jury trial. Because in the Seventh Amendment it says, in suits at common law where the value is controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise reexamined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. So between the Sixth Amendment, which says that in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. We have problems with all of the Sixth Amendment, because where's the speedy trial that they're guaranteed? And why have these men been sitting in jail without any bail? And where's the an impartial jury when they are being fed all this terrible nonsense by media that has been twisting and turning and deceiving the people? And they have
Now,
to be.
are you telling me also that not? Are you telling me, Shauna, that all of these men have not been allowed to have even post any bail, and because they've been sitting there for a year, of course they're not getting their speedy trial? We have Skylar Bardeau up in Washington, who's former military, who has been given trumped up charges, and they're not allowing him bail or a speedy trial either. This violates the Constitution and the rights of due process.
Absolutely.
This violates their due process, right? It's violating.
Absolutely violating their due process, and they should be able to confront their accusers. But that's not how it happens. We have people that are going in and lying to grand juries that have made up all these false statements, and they were used up there and they're being used down here. And that's what we have to, and we have to prove our innocence. Not we're innocent until proven guilty. We're absolutely guilty until we prove our innocence. And it's from all the lies that keep being put out. And we are absolutely sick about this. So we
okay.
Sorry, there are so many things that's hard to.
So what are the propositions right now that when now we know that Jason Patrick is going to be one of those tried up in Portland along with Sean Anderson, Sandy Anderson, and some of the others. Now, I actually went up to the jail up there in Portland last year and was put on the visitor list by Sean Anderson. And while I was up there visiting with Sean Anderson, he told me that even after his wife was released and they were keeping him in there, he was telling me about some of the things that they were doing to him and his family, including FBI agents in black Suburbans had actually driven up the road to where his house was, where he was renting a house, and the landlord saw them go by and break the chain that had his camper out in front, and they drove off with his camper. They were stealing items in and out of his property while he and his wife were sitting in jail. Where is their due process? And why, when you go to the federal agents later and you say, I know that you got Ammon Bundy's $4,000 to $6,000. I know you have Gary Hunt's drone. I know you have Ted Bedwell's computer equipment. And they sit there and lie through their teeth and say, well, we don't know who has it. It disappears out of the property books. I mean, this is theft. We have government employees, Shauna, that are stealing equipment and people's belongings because they think now it's a freedis gratis.
Well, it is sad. In this last trial, let me explain to you, there was 29 original people that were indicted the first time in Oregon. That's a lot of people. And I have learned that through their process, these courts have been able to set up a system where the attorneys will come and put the pressure on you and give you advice, because the best thing they can do for you is get you to plead out. If you plea out to a lesser charge for a lesser time, then they make money, and it's good for them, it's good for the judge, and it's good for business, because you see, that's all it is. It's a court. It's appellate court. It's a court it's all about money. And so the first ones, when we went in, we already had 11 people who pled out of Oregon. And it was because they wait for a while and they break them down and they threaten them and they give them a really short time. They say, okay, if you take a deal by, like in 3 days or in 2 days or whatever, we'll make you this kind of deal. And otherwise you're going to be here forever. And they trump up all these things on this chart that says, for this crime, you're going to spend another 5 or 6 years. You're going to be here for 7. You're going to be here for a lifetime. You're going to be here 25 to life. I mean, it was unreal the other day when I sat in court with these first 6 men here in Nevada, and the charges that they were being charged with and then being cited. They read them all of their the maximum sentences, and they really, really ran them over the coal, especially if you tried to go pro se. We had one man that was going pro se, and they wanted to make sure that he wanted to stay pro se, and they put the pressure on you, something awful. They send one judge after another, or your attorneys in, to really try to scare the pants off of you so that you will not go pro se. And then read you all of the maximum sentences they can possibly throw at you. And when they got finished with Todd Angle the other day, it was unbelievable, because it was like maximum 5 years for this sentence, fine of $250,000. It could be one or both. We have, the judge has the option to, implement both sentences, or it could be a minimums of 7 years. And if it's more than one of those minimums of 7 years, then you automatically on a second one will be 25 years to life. It added up to 3 or more lifetimes by the time he got finished, by the time they got through telling him all the charges that were against him. What I thought was really funny was that Todd Angle said, and this is the first time I really ever met him, and he said, well, you don't have to read them all. He says, because I'm not going to prison. And he's very confident, and he knows that the Lord's on his side. And I think that is phenomenal. And then finally, when the judge got through reading all the charges, she said, and now, after any of these charges, after all these charges, if you've been found guilty, we can add $100 each on top of them. It's that we have to add $100 charge for each. And he threw his hands in the air and says, well, that isn't that over the top? Gosh, like $250,000 isn't a big enough fine, so we got to add $100 more. Anyway, it was crazy, but I was really impressed with him. I think that they try to keep their spirits up. They get beat down some, but they know that they're fighting on the right side and that God's going to protect them and help them. Um, the and there has been, like I said, 11 of them pled out up in Oregon. We still have the first trial went through. We were acquitted. The second trial is starting on the 14th, and that's Sean and Sandy Anderson, Daryl Thorne, Jeffrey Stanek, Travis Cox, Jake Ryan, Jason Patrick, Dwayne Emmer. And not only are they being charged with the same charges that we were charged with, but like I said, they added a bunch more misdemeanors, which is unreal. I'm happy that we're going to be able to go to John Day. Well, there's going to be a lot of people at John Day, I think, but I think that people should go there and they need to stand up for the meeting that never took place. That was supposed to be a very uplifting, good meeting, and I'm sure this one will be too, because it's just going to show the truth about the people and that they really want to stand together for this country, that they have it in their hearts, and they have a lot of love. Let me tell you, it's wonderful to be around them. You get charged up. It's every American needs to reach into their soul deep down and see where their true loyalty is. Who is your God? Is it gold? Is it God? What is it? And we have to get on the side of the Lord so we'll win. We can't win without that. We need to stick together. And I always tell everybody, take your camera. And that was the saving thing, I guess you'd say saving thing, in all situations so far. Because a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I think because of that is why the Lord put me in that truck with Lavoy and Ryan and Victoria and Ryan Payne. Because we have to expose the evil things that are happening and stop putting our head in the sand and thinking that it's just going to go away and everybody else can fix it and we don't have anything to do. We have lots to do. Every one of us have something to do. We have to be listening to the Spirit. Everybody doesn't have the same thing to do, and I can't tell you what to do. But some people are in their life where they have little children and they have to take care of them. They have to support them. That's really important. And there are just a time in your life, like my mother used to say, you will have time for everything that you need to do. And you will. I'm telling you, you will. And we have so many families that are suffering because of these choices that other people have made, and they're Americans. We can't allow Americans to attack Americans. We have to reach out with love. We have to reach out with understanding, but we do not have to let them destroy our Constitution. We have a responsibility to stand and safeguard our lives, our properties, and our families, and our way of life. We have a responsibility. And if we don't want to, then guess what? Maybe we need to go some other place where we want somebody to do everything for us. It's a tough call. But I think most Americans realize that we have a lot of freedoms. We have a lot of people who are spoiled. And spoiled isn't a good word, guys. Spoiled means you're rotten. It means you're lazy, you're no good, and you should be thrown into the trash. That's what happens when you have food that is rotten. Rotten is not a good word, or spoiled. But we have hard-working Americans that should be worth their weight because they care about other people. That's what matters.
Now, my question I have for you, Shauna, is, one of the things that I told your husband the other night, Donald, that he and the rest of your family He has done so much to help try to, run the business and help support the family so you can take the stand that you're taking. I mean, I'm sure that you spent many hours writing that book, and he was your champion. He was the person that was standing side to side, back to back with you. And I truly believe that your spiritual faith and your belief, that of you and your family and your beautiful sister Holly, um, you women taught my husband and I so much when we went up to Portland and stayed with you those few days that we stayed with you and Holly. It was such an honor and such a privilege to see that you guys were so calm under the worst of circumstances. And I truly believe it's the faith that you have and the Bundys have. And I include Lisa and Angie and Carol in this, and Davies and Mel's wives as well, that it's because of your faith that you've been able to stand like you have and not allowed it to bow you down to the point where you've
It
just
is
given
from
up.
faith, and I thank you for that. They are beautiful families. They do have the faith, and they're strong, but they can't go on forever. They still need supportive people. They need your loving arms around them. They need that. They need physical support. They need mental support. They need that love to know that other people care and that other people are out there. We need people to be at those sites. We need them to be out, standing outside. You can't all get inside the courtroom, but it's good to know that there's people out there who care and they show up. And when the hearings are coming, that they have friends and they have people who understand. When I went to court the other day, there was 3 of us in the courtroom, and there was no family or friends. There was nobody outside protesting about these men whose lives matter. They did a heroic thing. They are heroes, and yet everybody goes, I know you can't all come because you have families and you have jobs and you have things that keep us tied down, that we can't stand for those things that are the most important. That's how they keep us so busy. But we have to share and sacrifice, and we have to take turns in standing. We can't all do it at the same time, but we can do it sometimes. And we can do a little bit, and every little bit counts. Every little bit helps. I see these homeless people on the streets, and my heart breaks. I mean, there was a lot of them in Portland, but I see some that are as tragic of the ones that even down here in Las Vegas. Where are our hearts? When do we reach out and help these people?
I agree with you. When I went up to Portland, it was a few hours drive one way, and I had the pleasure of finally meeting Deb Jordan. She was there visiting her man, Pete Santelli, and she's been standing by him. And I met with Mo. Everybody called her Sergeant Mo. She was a staff sergeant, retired out of the U.S. Army. She knew that I had retired out of the U.S. Army. And both she and I were standing there, putting our names on the visitors list to go up. Like, I got to go up to meet with my husband. I went up to visit Ryan Bundy. We were put on his visitors list by him. Sean Anderson put us on his visitors list. And for those people that we were not on their visitors list, we were taking what little money that we had, and so was Sergeant Mo, and we're putting money in the commissary accounts with many of these political prisoners, these patriots that we had never even met when we were up in Harney County. It did not matter. They were brothers and sisters that took a stand. They were the ones that they didn't pay the ultimate price like Lavoie did, but they paid the next thing right below it. And I mean, you were one of the fortunate ones that they let out early on. But many of these, I think what they're afraid of is that they're going to speak for the Constitution. They're going to keep shouting about due process. And that's why they're keeping them locked up in solitary. That's why they're keeping them political prisoners, because they're hoping that the American people will forget about it. The news media won't cover it. And so all of a sudden now, you're not seeing the people out there protesting in Portland. You're not seeing the amount of people protesting in Las Vegas, because everybody's like, it's not my problem. It's somebody else's problem. Somebody else can better do it than me. So the American people, many of them are very lazy, and they want everybody else to pay the sacrifice and pay the price for standing up for freedom. They say, let somebody else do it. And that's unacceptable, Shauna.
Isn't that sad?
That's totally unacceptable.
We only can go so much.
Yeah.
And you know what? there's a lot of people that can't afford to go places or health-wise can't do it. And some of them have been so gracious, I have to say, that they have done everything they could. They gave they're like the widow's mite, and they sent things to help. And I want them to know how much they are loved. I appreciate the people who've sent cards and letters and keep their spirits up, and that makes a big difference. People have spent their time and money and taken off work, and they go and they visit the prisoners when they can. And the prisons make it very difficult to have visitors, because you have to go through especially down here, you have to go through well, in both places. This one is just look through a monitor, but they regulate you, and so that you can't really visit very well, because like these guys down here, they get 1 hour a week. Well, let's say one visitor a week. And so if one person if comes, and maybe they bring their kids that day, they get to see them once a week. Well, if they can't make it on one of those days, then they either don't have anybody, or, that's terrible. People get worn out. That's a long way to travel to visit just for 1 hour during a whole week. And so it isn't easy. I know that these are not hotels, these are prisons. But why are they keeping good people in prison? That's the big question. Why Americans? Why do we have people who can go downtown and protest and break cars and set them on fire and beat up people and kill them, and they don't spend near the time that these men have been sitting in jail, who have done absolutely nothing? They didn't carry a gun, they didn't shout fire, none of that happened. And yet here they are sitting, and they can't be there to even defend their family or to provide for them.
Well, Shauna, we're going to come right back after the station break. Folks, call 702-605-4436 if you have any questions. 702-605-4436. We will take phone calls for 30 minutes, which is the first half of the last hour. We're with Shauna Cox, and this is the new Concord show, and being brought to you by Revolution Radio here at www.freedomslips.com. You're with Shauna Cox and yours host, Maggie Rose, and board engineer, Jer Bear.
Producer.
Good evening, folks, and this is Maggie Rose McGrath again, and you are with us on the Concord Show here on Revolution Radio at www.freedomslips.com. For those of you that have any questions for tonight's VIP guest, you may call in to 702-605-4436. That's 702-605-4436. And our board engineer producer, Jer Bear, will let us know that you are on the line. We do have a question from one of our listeners in the chat room, Shauna. Folks, we are listening tonight to Shauna Cox. She was in the convoy and the vehicle with Lavoy Finnegan when he was brutally murdered and shot down in cold blood there on the way that they were going to meet ranchers and farmers in John Day, Oregon. They were going to the Senior Citizens Community Center there to talk with ranchers and farmers, talk about due process, talk about the Constitution, have comradeship, talk about the committees of safety. And the governor of Oregon and the powers may be in Washington, D.C. under Obama and Valerie Garrett and some of the other federal authorities did not want their, and I quote them from their emails and the text messages that we were sent by Anonymous, we cannot allow the toxicity or the poison to spread from Harney County to other places throughout Oregon. We cannot allow the toxicity and poison of their messages to spread to other places in Oregon. So therefore, they conducted an ambush where they shot at Shauna Cox and others in the vehicle and basically were trying to draw them out to shoot back, which is what they did not do. We have Shauna Cox with us live here. Shauna, we have a question. Thank you and welcome again back to the Concord Show. We have a guest in the chat room, Shauna. Her question is, ask Shauna Cox, did Lavoy Finnegan and Bundy and others agree that they were United States citizens, and did they pay tax on the land? Ask Shauna, did Lavoy Finnegan and others agree they were United States citizens, and did they pay tax on the land? Because if they do, they cannot use common law. They are under statutory law, period. What say you, Shauna?
I will tell you that they are Americans, and they know and they agree because we're born Americans and we're in the land of the free. Here's the problem. It's not because they didn't pay tax on the land. There is no tax. It wasn't the tax that everybody keeps thinking. What they're complaining and charging them with is that they didn't pay for their AUMs. Now, AUMs are charged by the amount of cows that you have or livestock, and it's used to hire what we call the BLM. The BLM is a Bureau of Land Management. We cannot force someone to sign a contract with anyone to manage their property. If you don't want management, you do not have to take it. Cliven only refused to sign a contract that would manage them out of business. That's what happened, and that's why 52 other ranchers are out of business, because it was no longer profitable to make a business when they were being regulated down to where they couldn't make a living any longer, and they had to move on. Of course, their children aren't going to want to do it because there is no money in that industry any longer. The problem with that is that then we lose our cattle industry, and what are we going to do? Import all of our beef? From where?
Exactly. Now, I also understand that the Hammonds were the last ranchers and farmers that were left standing because the government was able to flood with water out all the other ranchers and farmers, but because the Hammonds were on the higher ground, they could not get flooded out. And what they were saying is, we are willing to pay grazing fees, but it has to be reasonable. And the Bundys said, we will pay our grazing fees, but not to the federal government, who has no right to own land or manage this land. We will pay the grazing fees to Nevada. But Harry Reid, who had a deal with the communist Chinese, told the people in Nevada, the legislature, do not accept the grazing fees from the Bundy family. Now, Shauna, we have a caller that's calling in. Jer Bear, would you bring up the caller, please?
He dropped.
I understand we have a caller.
He dropped.
Okay, he dropped. So, Jer Bear, why don't you ask your question now, Jer Bear? You had a question for Shauna.
Hi, Shauna.
Hi.
Yes. Hi, Max. Anyway, I'm over, just real quick, brief. I'm over at my Facebook, busted my chops to try to wake some of my old comrades up from high school. It's like, deadheads. You know, wake up, America. We're here trying to show you something. Anyway, I just want to say it's a pleasure, Shauna, that you're with us, and I got a chance to mingle with you. I like to say is, yes, I recall Vegas in the 80s. We had 60 ranchers out there going fishing, and I could not figure out till Mr. Bundy had this incident back in 2 years ago that where they all went. I didn't understand it, and why the steaks used to be $2 at the Horseshoe. Everything was cheap for a nice steak, and this is what happened. They pulled the wool over our eyes, and the Bundys are heroes in my book. I need to go with you and find out when you go. I'll back you. I never know when the court system is, but you got my back. Okay, I'll go with you.
I appreciate it.
Do you have a question?
My question is, not at the moment. Go ahead. I just want to say thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
So, Shauna, can you kind of give us a little bit of a feeling? You are basically what we call in the Army boots on the ground, eyes there. You wrote this wonderful book again. Would you please tell the people what the name of your book is and where they can get that book?
The book is called The Last Rancher Standing. It's the incident that took place in Nevada at the Bundy Ranch on the Gold Butte. It is the story I wrote was because I knew that the Lord had told me I must write this book, because I saw many miracles, and that was at the very, very beginning. There was peace and love in the home. when all around us there was chaos and things that were happening. And the people across the nation, as I would ask them why they came, they would always say, I just felt like I was supposed to be there. And they came in support. And a lot of them, most of them were saying, we couldn't stand the fact that, and understand why Americans were being beat up. I mean, they could see pictures. The people weren't armed. They were being tased. They were being attacked by dogs, and they had no weapons. Why was this happening? And how could it happen? We have to understand that I think that Americans have become so used to the almighty dollar that they will do whatever it takes as long as they get paid. And this is not the way with the Bundys. I saw how much they gave. They fed people. They took care of people when they came. They gave everything and more. There were people who donated, but they gave Cliven would give you the shirt off his back. He is one of the most generous, loving men I've ever met, and he taught his children the same. And you will see that in their demeanor and their speech, and they have every right to protect their family, to protect their animals, to protect their home, their rights. They actually own that property, and they have a right to protect it. It's guaranteed in the Constitution. Where's the Constitution, and how have we allowed it to be stolen from us? I'd like to read you just a little letter. Can I do that? It's not really a letter. It's a speech that I wrote before. This is one of the reasons that I decided to go up to Oregon. I was so upset. They told me I had to. Are you there?
I'm here. I do have a quick question.
Yes, I'm listening. We're here.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
Max,
here.
check the text, please.
Did we fade away?
So, we're here. We're listening. With callers, we need to let you know that when you do call into the show, you please have to be patient. We will bring you up, but somebody keeps trying to call into the show and then they keep dropping. So please hang in there with us, and we'll get right around to you. Okay, go ahead, Shauna. You have a letter to read to us?
I was going to read you this little speech that I was writing because I was really upset at one point in time. There's so many things that happened to us that, and it actually goes back to Scripture, because all we do is repeat history, and Scripture is history. And we have to understand how hard it is for us to humble ourselves and get on our knees and try to listen to what the Lord wants us to do. I feel like there are many who have been doing that, and there have been more and more. And we are brought to our knees, and we hope we don't have to go clear to the ground before we start waking up and we understand that the sacrifices we will have to make, our children have to make. It is horrendous to see the many people that are in prison because of drugs, and they have been brought in by some of the elite of this country to enslave others, and it's a tragic thing that's happening. And I think most people on your show, Maggie, probably understand all the things that have happened across this nation, clear from 911, from Waco, from Ruby Ridge. I mean, you name it, and it continues to keep going on. The problem is that army gets bigger and stronger that comes against Americans. What I want people to understand is this: we have a broken system only because we allow it to be that way. When the federal agents have the ability to come in and entrap you, and that's what they do. And that's what we saw. We had undercover agents that tried to entrap us and ramp it up so that they could say that we did something wrong. And then they send U.S. Marshals to arrest you. And then they take you in front of a federal court where they will give you a federal defense attorney if you can't afford one, or you have to pay for one. Or they will they have a federal prosecutor to prosecute you. and whom the judge backs up and says right in court that they will side with the government most of the time. I mean, they will, and then you have the judges who are federally appointed, and those attorneys rely upon those judges to for their bread and butter. So they're not going to go against that hand that feeds them. They'll never bite that hand. And nobody can serve two masters. So how are they going to defend us and keep their job when the judge wants to make sure that we go to prison or pay humongous amounts of fines or prison time because it's all about money? It's a conspiracy against the American people. There's no separation of powers. It's like a huge gang I don't know if it's a mafia where they blackmail people into even pleading out. And because they have to lie to plea a lot of the times. I mean, these guys, literally had to lie to plea out because the stuff that they had to plea to made them liars, and then that's heartbreaking because they didn't really want to do it in the first place, but they're forced to, unless they want to be in prison for the rest of their lives. So what do you call that? It's like extortion. Where are the good people? The good people have to stand up and they have to take office. And that's what we are so proud of Donald Trump. He's the very first person that wasn't an attorney, that wasn't one of the elite, that was able to make it into the White House. It didn't have to be, he went on his own merits. That's good. Now we hope that he is always on the Lord's side and that he will do the right thing. And we're glad that no president has more than 4 years. And the Constitution is set up for that very purpose, that when we have a representative government like we do, when we got ones that aren't doing the right thing, we can throw them out. You cannot vote out a federal judge or a federal prosecutor or a federal attorney. You can't. They are an absolute gang.
Entrenched. Entrenched. They're entrenched. Yeah.
They're
entrenched. Dug in. They're entrenched.
And they make their own.
They're entrenched. Now, Shauna.
Yes.
There you go. And that was one of the things, Shauna. I don't remember. Were you there on the morning of the 20th? Weren't you there when Ryan Bundy, Ammon Bundy, Ryan Payne, and Lavoie were teaching the class on the Constitution in the firehouse? Were you
Absolutely.
there for that 2-hour class?
Yes, absolutely.
I thought I saw you sitting over.
I'd already heard that many times.
I've
been involved with them for a lot of years. So, yes, I do know that.
So there was a gal that was sitting on the... there was a gal that was sitting on the floor in front of me. I was sitting on one of the cots, of the litter cots, and my husband was standing behind me. And there was a gal that was videotaping, and I only videotaped a portion because my camera ran out of battery, but she was videotaping the whole thing. And one of the things they were teaching us, Shauna, was the fact there is the Constitution of the United States, which is a piece of paper that only has teeth to it when we, the people, stand up and make that Constitution stand to the ground. But then they were also teaching us there are 2 other constitutions that the government has snookered us into. They've tricked us into. One of them is a statutory law, what they call their own constitution under statutory law. And then there's another constitution that they've made, which is sort of like administrative. Now, if I'm correct, Shauna, when we have people that come into this country and decide that they want to disavow their homes of birth and become American citizens, one of the things that they have to have on their test is, what are the 3 branches of government? Legislative, executive, and judicial. The executive is the president. The legislative is the Supreme Court. The Congress is the legislative. The judicial is the federal courts and the courthouses. How is it that the government has found a way in the last 100 years to create their own 4th branch of government illegally, called an administrative branch of government, where they stick the FBI, the CIA, the BLM, the Department of Treasury, the BATF, and all these other rogue agencies that have no one overseeing them. And we're understanding, if I'm correct, help us with this. The administrative fourth branch of government is where the BLM is doing what they're doing to us.
Administrative is actually about money. So administrative government, that's what they do. The court is all about money. So what happens is, really, the fourth branch of government shouldn't be called administrative, because that's really not a branch of government. That is an unconstitutional force, and they're conspirators. They've created this. I can't even think what we call it exactly. It's anyway. The fourth branch of government, as Justice Scalia told us, is that we have a jury. And that's what we learned. This is the absolute truth, was during our trial. We had a jury of our peers. The jury of your peers is someone who is the closest to you, someone that you know, that you trust, that understands your way of life. We were so blessed, because the people in Portland, Oregon, I promise you, don't understand about ranching. They don't understand about the cattle industry. They don't understand about that way of life. It's totally different than the urban area. But they, like all others, were awakened, probably because the Lord let them hear what they couldn't hear. They were able to see that there was more, that they had to ask questions, that they didn't know anything about it. It was never allowed into the court, but it was there, and they understood that they couldn't hear it. So there was no way that they could convict, because they didn't have the truth, and they knew it. That was the hardest part. And that was the thing that saved us. That's no wonder that these federal courts, and I'm telling you, after we had won, I was told by the attorneys themselves that the court wins 97% of the time. So we were a very small minority, a very exception to the rule, that we actually won the court case. And the only reason we did is because of the jury, and because the Lord inspired them, I'm telling you, because they did not understand our way of life or the culture, but they do understand right and wrong. And that's what was the truth. And we have to always tell the truth. That's what you're going to see in the next court cases. You will hear the truth. You will see the truth. These are good, upstanding, righteous men. Perfect? No. But good and righteous and upstanding. I'm telling you, they have hearts, wonderful hearts. That's why they came. And they're of one heart and one mind. And they came because they wanted to keep America free. They came because they understand maybe not all of the Constitution and maybe not all the rights, but they do know the difference when someone is being evil and someone is being good. And they felt it. And that's what I'm telling you, that they came because they felt it. And that's how we can tell the difference between right and wrong, is you will know in your heart and you will know in your mind, and it feels right. And that's why they stood. And we are honored, and I'm very humbled by them.
Well, I am so glad that, that definitely that those people that were on the jury, what's upsetting to me is the fact that when they know now that you guys basically were exonerated from everything and you were cleared, so they're now going to go after the Andersons and Jason Patrick and all the others up in Portland on the same thing, but they want to make sure, because they lost face here. They know they were lying. They know that they were making you guilty and then trying to say, now you have to prove yourself innocent, but we're not going to allow you to present all the evidence to present yourself innocent. So they were so angry at the jury for coming back with that decision that now what they're going to do is they're going to try all the others on the same charges they tried you, but now they're going to put all these trumped up misdemeanor charges that are made up and add to those same people that did the same thing you did. They were in the same place as you were, And yet they're going to say, okay, we want to make sure that if there's a jury that finds them innocent, like they found the last group of people, we're going to make sure that the judge will then have all these misdemeanor charges we're going to add to this second group of people, and only the judge will be able to make the decision on the trumped up, made up misdemeanor charges. This is a travesty. And what I'm kind of curious about, Shauna, I'm very curious about something. I don't know exactly what happened in the courtroom, but we were told that you were there, and that when they were found innocent, that the judge was basically asked by the attorney who was for Ammon Bundy and the others. He said, wait a minute, I want my people now released. And the judge was not going to release them. And he started to argue with her. And the U.S. Marshals, we were told, jumped on him, tased him, physically assaulted him. And that David Fry jumped forward to try to help the attorney. And he was also arrested and hauled off to jail with the attorney. Now, were you there? Did you see this?
I was there, and it's not quite like that, but it kind of. What happened was that after we had been acquitted and we were to leave the room, the judge was telling, like normal, telling us to all remain seated while the marshals took Mr. Bundy, and Mr. Fry out of the room. And the attorney, Mr. Mumford, for Ammon said, no, Your Honor, they have just been acquitted. And he said they are released. They are leaving the room with me because, and she said, no, the U.S. Marshals are going to take them. There's charges in Nevada. And he said, I have looked all yesterday and all this morning, and there is no warrant for their arrest from Nevada. They have nothing to hold them on. And he said, and she said, well, they're going to take them. And he said, no, they are leaving the courtroom with me. And he said to her, you have no more jurisdiction, do you, Your Honor? Because they were just acquitted by a jury. And she said, no, I don't. But, and then she proceeded to work her words anyway, to try to say that, the marshals are going to take him. And Mr. Mumford said, and he did the right thing, because he actually was trying to, he's a defense attorney, and his thing is to defend his client. And he knew that they had the right. He said to her, you can't take them without a warrant. Show me the paper. Show me the paper. You took them the first time without a warrant. Show me the paper. And they didn't show any paper. And that's when they came forward, and the U.S. Marshals came forward and took hold of him, pulled him from out behind the table. And they grabbed his arms and proceeded to put him to the floor, and kept saying, quit resisting, and which he wasn't, because I could see him. I was only like 3 to 6 feet away from him. I was very close. And then one was twisting his leg, and the others were trying to pull his arm down, push his head down, and had jumped on his back. And I was there, and now our happiness had turned into anger for me. I was very upset. And they tased him. One of them tased him in the back, at which time he said, now you're hurting me. At first he kept saying, I'm not resisting, which he wasn't. But anyway, it was outrageous, because they pushed us all out of the room. At that point, they had a bunch more federal agents come and hustle us out. And I was upset. Now, David Fry did not jump up there. He was upset too, but he rose up and then they took him out into the hall, and then they took the Bundys out, I suppose. And then eventually, because we didn't get to stay, they rushed everyone out of the room. And we just knew that Mr. Fry went back to the jail. He told me later that he had been pushed up against the wall and put the cuffs back on. He didn't want to put the cuffs on. He said, no, I'm a free man. And anyway, so he eventually got out in about 3 or 4 hours. But, and they took Mr. Mumford, and maybe it was 6 hours. It was quite a long time to process him out. And then, of course, they kept Ammon and Ryan, and Anyway, it was a circus. It was terrible, and took them to Seattle, Washington. Within a few days, they took him up there and kept him for 2 or 3 weeks. That which made no sense whatsoever. I think they were just trying to get him out of the state of Oregon. I don't know why they did that. And before they even took him back to Nevada.
It's called. Well, I know what it's called. Yeah, I know what it's called. And also, I was asked to hear in the chat room, whoever is calling from area code 909, you've tried to call in twice and you've dropped. If you want to ask a question of Shauna, you've got 5 more minutes to do that. Please call back. Anybody who's in area code 909, please try to call back and Jer Bear will bring you up. Shauna, I think I have an answer to that. It's called diesel therapy. I have talked to a lot of political prisoners and other people that were in the prison system and then kind of disappeared. What they do is they put them on buses or vans, and they try to use the excuse that they don't have enough prisons or jails to put them in. But they do this with a lot of teenagers. They do this with a lot of juvenile delinquents, and they put them in buses or in big, huge vans, maybe 10, 15 people at a time or more. And they drive them literally all over the country. And the only time they stop is usually to go to the bathroom. And they have to eat on this bus. They usually have to sleep on the bus. And it's called diesel therapy. They also do it to get the family members away from their loved ones who are the prisoners or political prisoners. They're trying to remove the prisoners or the political prisoners from their families, from their attorneys, from being able to prepare their cases. It's called psychological warfare, and it's a term called diesel therapy. When they took them up to Seattle, Washington, what they were doing was trying to remove them away from their family members, remove them away from their supporters, remove them away from their attorneys or their public defenders, and they were trying to make sure that they were kept isolated. And that's another form of diesel therapy, and that's what they did. Now, we have a question from Jared Bear. He wants me to ask you, Shauna, if there was a question that came out of the chat room. Do you think Pete Santelli is a shill? What does that mean? SHILL.
No, I do not. I think that
What
they
is
think,
a shill?
well, my understanding is that people are thinking that means he's not real. that he's been placed there by some kind of government agency. But Pete is for real. He is a ex-Marine. He is very well educated and has a lot of knowledge, and he knows a lot about media, which has been phenomenal. He put out a whole bunch of awesome things down at the Bundy Ranch and here at the, and at the Malheur. I think he's just a freedom-loving American, and he's trying to make a living doing media. And sometimes media people are a little drama, and that's okay because it takes that kind of people to get people's attention, and that's what we just as long as they tell the truth, it's okay to be drama. It's okay, but his heart is good. That's all I can tell you. He's a good man. Yeah.
I agree with you. There's a lot of people out there like, people like Pete Santelli or John Statmiller or Alex Jones. They may be making money off of what they're doing, and sometimes they might overemphasize or get a little bit what some people call drama queens. But then there's most of us here on Revolution Radio, and there's over 90 show hosts here who we are all volunteers, and none of us are getting paid for anything. What money is brought into Revolution Radio helps to support, to pay for the Skype, the electricity, the computer access. We have at least 4 or 5 different phone lines where people can either call in and listen live on their landlines or on their cell phones or come into Skype. So therefore, Nighthawk and his wife are putting out more money probably than they're taking in from donations. The rest of us 90 show hosts, we totally do not get paid for anything. We're not selling a product. We're not trying to hawk a product. For me, usually when I bring up a guest, It'll take me maybe 2 or 3 hours of talking to the potential guests, interviewing them, getting the information they want to put out, looking it up myself, verifying the evidence and the documentation. I can put in anywhere from 20 to 30 hours a week in preparing for 3 of my shows. So I think Pete Santelli, in what he was doing, he was such a threat, Shauna, because he was so outspoken and because of the fact that he was putting out the information he was. Mike Emery. Mike Emery was up there on the day that Lisa came to pick up Ammon Bundy's belongings. And he was there the day that you had your 3 girlfriends and Tom Davis come to the refuge to pick up your car and your belongings. We talked to Mike Emery. Now, he's made a few mistakes that might have gotten him where he is. But I also believe that the government was there with his so-called friend, and they basically set him up because of the fact he was with the Voice of Idaho. And he and his wife were trying to make sure they had videotapes and audio tapes of everything that was going down. And people like Mike Emery, Voice of Idaho, and people like Pete Santelli are considered a threat to the federal government because they know that our controlled media is ABC News, Fox News, CBS, CNN, NBC, MSNBC. These are controlled news media if they want to keep their licensure, if they want to keep their jobs. But we in the alternative media, Shauna, we aren't getting paid. And they would love to take us down. And that's why I believe they went after Pete Santelli. That's why they went after his girlfriend, Deb Jordan. I think that's why they went after Mike Emery. What do you say about that?
I really believe that because Mike Emery is a good man. Like I said, these poor guys got set up, they got entrapped, and it's terrible when you can't trust people or believe in them. That's what happened at the refuge. There were people that we uncovered that were informants. And speaking of which, Gary put out all, the names and all the information on the informants and most of them. And the government came unglued and threw a fit and tried to have him arrested, really. They told him to cease and desist. He got a cease and desist order, I believe it was last week. And he said, I don't have to. This is the freedom of the press. And I have a First Amendment right. And anyway, so Judge Brown tried to go across state lines with her power and have him arrested. Now, see, they already did that. They kidnapped Mel Bundy out of Arizona. They kidnapped Dave Bundy out of Utah. I mean, they went to great lengths to send in a number of, 8, 10, 12, 15, 16 different federal agents to go in and literally kidnap these people. And in Idaho, I mean, it has been crazy how they have this right to just go across this nation and arrest anyone they feel like, or like in a band. It's unreal. But I was going somewhere with that. Anyway, I forgot what I was telling you now.
What I would like to say about that, Shauna, is the fact is that my friend and your friend Gary Hunt in Northern California,
Yes.
he was a Vietnam veteran, came back from Vietnam. When Waco took place, he was a volunteer journalist. Nobody paid him a fee. He went down to Waco. He was eyes on the ground, boots on the ground, saw the truth about what was going on with Waco. When Ruby Ridge took place, Gary Hunt went up to Ruby Ridge and he saw the truth of what was going on up there. He told me last week that Judge Brown did what she did was she had her FBI in Oregon, in her jurisdictional area in Portland, contact the FBI in California and have an FBI agent ask Gary Hunt to meet him near his home to serve him the order that he needed to stop putting out the information in his articles. And he said, he said, this information is not classified. This information has not been redacted. And I am not in your jurisdiction. And now the ball's in your court, folks, because I am not doing anything wrong by outing these informants, these people that were actors that actually went in there and cause these problems so they could set up these patriots to take a fall. Olive is calling in. Olive, are you there with us on the Concord Hour? And would you like to ask Shauna a question? Hello, Olive, are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Well,
Yeah, this is the
I,
mail. This is the mail, Olive. Anyway, I think that's the 11th Amendment to the Constitution you're talking about there. You know, I don't know how much you've, regardless of whether it's statutory law or common law, I just want to say right out before I say this question, you guys are doing wonderful, and you have great hearts and wonderful people. And I hope when you pray that the good God actually comes forward. But as Christians, you have to understand you're going to suffer, right? So, you know, in the United States and the United
what
States.
is your question, Olive?
That's what I'm getting ready to do. In the United States, there's 2 citizens. There's 2 courts. Hold on one second. There's 2 laws. You have constitutional republic and legislative democracy. So people get this stuff mixed up.
Right.
And if you willfully pay taxes to the IRS, you lose that jurisdiction. Go ahead.
I understand, because what you're trying to say is you become a citizen of the corporation.
Right.
Yeah, if you willfully pay taxes and you willfully, remember the word willfully, if you willfully do those things, you're heeding jurisdiction to the federal courts.
I understand exactly where you're coming from. Part of the problem is you have to educate the people enough to be able to get that. That's what's happened, is they've taken our education system and they've thwarted it, so people don't understand any of this part. It's very hard to live in a world where you're fighting the system all the time. I don't really want to go clear into that today because I do understand it.
Let me just ask this question and I'll hang up,
sure.
Maggie, okay? And because I know we're getting close to the end here. And then I'll listen on in the chat room. Donald Trump is the president. The Republicans hated him. The Democrats hate him. The media hate him. Everybody hates him except we the people. Do you think, with all your heart, that I think he will? He's going to pardon these guys who have not committed a crime. Go ahead. I'll listen offline. Thank you.
I would hope that he would exonerate all the political prisoners, because we have a lot of really good people in prison. Not just, there's a lot of veterans that are in prison because they've been entrapped. And why do you think that is? Because they are the ones that dare to stand up against the establishment, that dare to understand that this is a free country and that we have a constitution. But we won't have a constitution if we don't do that. That's why I'm saying we have to continue to do that, but we have to do it in numbers. We can't do it a few at a time. So until we get enough people educated to stand, then it's very weak, because there has to be enough people that understand it. So our education is liberation, if that makes sense. We have to be the brave ones, and if we expose the evil, it helps the people wake up, and that's what we're doing. And we can't quit. I mean, it's like an infection, We can't stop it unless we do something, and you have to do it now because it just continues to grow. I think Trump will do it.
I agree. Yeah. And, I think so too. I think there's a chance there were a lot of things about Trump that I didn't like. It seemed that at times he was punching the lion in the nose. He was very inflammatory at times. He didn't act in the beginning very presidential. He's been acting more presidential in the past couple weeks than he did the first few months of running for the election. But, I've had even family members and other people that have tried to tell me, he's got these sons that have never gotten their hands dirty. They've got their lily white hands. They're part of the elitists themselves. And family members telling me, oh, you watch, he's going to put us in war. He's going to cause a World War III, and your sons and grandkids are going to end up being killed in war. If we start off right away by judging Trump and assuming that because he's not a Democrat or because he's not Greenpeace or because he's not this or that he's going to be this horrible, horrible person, we're not even giving him a chance. Jer Bear wants to say something. Shauna, Jer Bear, go ahead.
I like to say that he just signed an
Jer
executive.
Bear.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
I'd like to say that
Yes.
Donald Trump just signed an executive order, 2 of them, to continue the pipeline that's going to go from Canada and North Dakota all the way to Louisiana to be refined. He says in that statement that it'll put like 30,000 people to work, that it'll be all good. The pipes will be made in America. That's caca. I have to say that this oil is not even for the American people. We need to address that and make him accountable. It's contracted for China and other Asian countries. That is the truth. We don't play here. I did my research. Over. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you very much, Jer Bear. Shauna, Olive 2M, who was up with you a few minutes ago, suggested that maybe Shauna Cox should contact the White House. What say you to that, Shauna?
I was hoping, we've sent people back there. I've been hoping that we are going to have that meeting. I can't guarantee it because I don't know for sure, but it's been out there. That's all I can tell you. And there is a great possibility that could happen.
Well, I think that, you know what, one of the things that really upset me is I got a phone call from a friend in Las Vegas area. His name is just Chris. He was former military. He's retired law enforcement. He discovered the very thing that Olive was talking about is that we have been tricked to pay income taxes for more than 50, 60 years now, that income actually means under the laws is corporate tax. Only corporations, major corporations, are earning actual income, and they're the ones that are supposed to be paying taxes. But the government, under the New World Order, has suckered us, and the Federal Reserve has suckered us for over 50 years to think that when you get up, Shauna, now, you come from a ranching family, I'm sure. Many of your friends are ranchers and farmers. So let's look at the scenario. A rancher gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. He feeds his animals before he feeds himself. He makes sure that the chores are done before the sun even has really barely come up over the horizon. He's out there working in the fields or working with the doggies, or we call the cattle. He's, blood, sweat, and tears, putting in sometimes a 15, 16, 17, 18-hour day. I've seen the ranchers and farmers doing this. They work their little butts off, okay? That's called earning your salary or earning your pay through blood, sweat, and tears. Why should you be taxed on your manual labor? That turns you into nothing but a slave. So if they have tricked us by making everybody in America afraid and say, look, if you don't pay your state taxes and you don't pay your income taxes and you don't voluntarily, they even say on the paper it's voluntary, but if you don't voluntary, you're going to go to jail. You're going to have your house taken, your cars taken, your boat taken, your livelihood taken. They're going to go into your bank accounts and take every penny that you have in your checking or savings, okay? So it's not voluntary anymore. Income is for corporations to pay taxes, not the American people. And that's what Olive 2M was trying to say. And just Chris, where you are right now, Shauna, he has written so many papers against the local government, the state government, and the federal government in your area in Las Vegas and Nevada. And they came to his house a few weeks ago, and they started towing his car out of the front yard because they didn't want him filing any more papers against the government for violating due process. He came out of his house in his pajamas with a gun in his hip. They told him to put the gun on the ground or on the top of his car. He did that. They said, now step out into the sidewalk and talk to us. He goes, no, I'm not stepping off my property. If you want to come, you talk to me on my property. They said, well, tell you what, you come down to the FBI office here in Las Vegas and bring all your filings with you and all your complaints against the local, state, and federal government and all the filings that you've got that people's due process has been violated, and we will look at your evidence. Well, the poor man went down to the FBI office with all of his proof and evidence about the corrupt governments, and he was arrested and thrown in jail for 35 days until
Wow.
somebody got him out. This is what they're doing. It's a scam, Shauna. It's a scam.
It's terrible, isn't it? That's awful. Yeah, and I totally agree. We can't all be what was really sad for us is that we did have a lot of undercover people, and that their hearts are to deceive and entrap and do those types of things. That's horrible that we have this in this country. Here's all I can say to them. As long as we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, the Lord's going to protect us. And no matter how many of them come against us, if we have faith, we will be able to defeat them. That's all we can do. We're not going to be perfect at it, but they won't be able to do the things that they want to do as long as we are standing our ground and being truthful and honest. We don't have to face these judges because all of us have an ultimate judge to face, and their day will come. I really do have to tell you one thing, though. I have to thank my husband. You brought him up earlier. Thank my husband for all the sacrifices he's had to make while I have been away during all these trials and all these legal fights and protests that we do, because he has been phenomenal, and it's very supportive, and it's very difficult to take over, and where I just left off and dropped everything into his lap and am here. We all are sacrificing. We're sacrificing a lot, and we have to, because we look at the our founding fathers and how much they gave, and we don't even appreciate it because we haven't had to give that much, but we are having to give that much, and if we don't wake up, we will be giving even more. So I appreciate all those people who have been waking up and are awake, and some are even further ahead than others by far. But their job, if you've learned more, you need to educate more. That's all I can tell you. So help to share. I also want, if there's people who can, if they have a little bit of money, go to the Citizens for Constitutional Freedom. You can find it on the Facebook too, and donate a little bit to these families and to all this legal things that we're doing. We have, I'm telling you, we have a group here. I call them my team, and they are doing it from their heart. They're paying to do it, not getting paid, and their funds are running very low. I should say they're living on hope and prayer. And if anybody cares to donate a little bit, then please go to that site, Citizens for Constitutional Freedom, and donate there. And Maggie, I can't thank you guys enough for all this, for coming and protecting me and standing by my side, and for getting us to the places we needed to get, putting the word out. And you do that all the time. You're always trying to teach people, and that's awesome. And I appreciate that, because I know you're giving a lot too. There are many who have been giving so much.
Shauna, it was a pleasure. Yeah, it was a pleasure. My husband and I, when we were told by our group to go up and provide security for you and Holly from the paparazzi, and we moved you from hotel to hotel to make sure that you could have your needs met and that you were where you wanted to be. That was a pleasure. That was our way of giving back to you. You gave up so much more. We're coming to the end of the hour, Shauna. I would like the people to know that if they go to www.theconcordshow.com, it's still in its creation phases, but I'm going to put a link to your website, Shauna. Can we bring you back another time, Shauna, here on the Revolution Radio? Is that okay with you?
Yes, and I'll try to be a little more.
We would like to have you come back. Okay. Well, folks, this Saturday night is going to be the event that never happened with Lavoie. It's John Day, and Shauna Cox will be there with the rest of us. They're at the John Day Fairgrounds on 28 January at 4:30 p.m. They're at the John Day Fairgrounds in Oregon. We want to see you there. Shauna, God bless you. Thank you so much. And Jer Bear, thank you. All of you listeners, all you people that called in the chat room, thank you. This is Maggie Rose, and we'll talk to you all next Monday morning at
Bye-bye.
Studio A.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And we'll be right back after this message.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between, including spiritual readings for those who seek enlightenment. Let Nightlight provide you with equal measure of light, love and laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration. Monday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Studio B, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Who are we? Where do we come from? Are you curious about the origins of the human race? Join me, Gavin McCall, and a variety of guests on Ancient Humans, where we decipher world events, explore scientific theories, personal stories, myths, mysteries, and lore about the history of the human race.
Listen in on Mondays, 8 Eastern Time on Revolution Radio for Journeys with JP. With a variety of guests, each giving their perspective on their journey into the now. Join me and my guests, Mondays, 8 p.m.